It's like too much to manage.
A lot.
Okay, it is recording. Okay, thanks everyone for being here on time. Sorry we're starting a few minutes late here. We had a room change on the Davis campus, so we're just waiting for a couple more people to trickle in, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. We are recording this session, so if people are late or whatever, they'll be able to watch later. So the topic for today's session is all about communication. And so we're dividing this session into two parts, the first of which will really be discussing students communicating with their host organization and best practices and challenges around that. And then the second half of the presentation, we'll have our communications staff person from the Horticulture Innovation Lab come in, and she'll talk to us about more external communications, so telling your story and possibly branding and things like that. So hopefully everyone got a chance to watch the recording from last year's session that Mark Bell, who's an extension specialist here at UC Davis, gave to the Trellis students in 2017. I've posted all of the documents from last year's session, so the recording, Mark's PowerPoint, the handout that he references, and I also took really extensive notes on the session, which I posted in the Google Drive as well. So everyone should be able to access that material. So I think it would be great if, maybe actually we can start with their presentations and then I'll ask students to share. Cool. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna get started with a presentation. We're gonna have Nick from UC Davis present first. Asha, I'll mute myself. So
okay. Awesome. Yeah, you can just sit here.
now, do you want to introduce yourself? I know we have your bio.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Nick Reitz. I am a PhD student here at UC Davis, and I did the Trellis program last year. It was an awesome experience. And I did mine in Ghana, working with the Methodist University College in Ghana. I know one of you is also working with them, and I'd love to talk to you at some point. But basically today I'll give a quick talk on some of the lessons I learned about communicating with the organization, because it's sort of a, you have to really fine tune your communication to make sure that everything works smoothly. And so these are just lessons that I learned. Many of them the hard way, but yeah, these are just lessons that I learned. They may contradict what other people say later, so just hopefully this is helpful for you. Okay, and do I just present this?
You just press
That and it'll.
hopefully. Usually that works. All right.
Hey.
Gross.
Yay.
All right. Can everybody see this? Yes? No? Yeah? No, just thumbs up?
Yes.
All right, cool. So yeah, so this is communicating. We'll go over both some of the observations I had remotely and in person. And this first picture is on here just as an example of one big part of communicating is just paying attention to your surroundings. As you can see, I'm smiling like a goofball in this picture. Everyone else is very serious because this was a picture of an accomplishment. And if I had looked around a little more, I could have seen that everyone else was very serious just for the picture. We're actually having a great time up until the second the picture was taken. So I just continued that emotional trajectory, and everyone else got very serious. And now it's a little bit of a goofy picture. So be aware of your surroundings. Now, just a beginning note. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. All right, yeah, so just as a beginning note, everything may be a little scary right now. I know certainly when I started, I didn't know much of anything about mangoes, but that's what I was dealing with. So I'd just like a couple of tips starting out. One, you are a connector of knowledge in this project. So if you don't specifically have all of the knowledge you need right now, that's completely okay and somewhat expected. But it's one way to think about it is just connecting knowledge, connecting your host organization to some of the resources that you have here or whichever university you're at. Remember that that you've got a very good background in whatever area is your expertise, and so don't forget that. And where you are, certainly as a graduate student, you may not seem like an expert to you or in the context of your current surroundings, but when you get placed into some of these situations, you'll be the expert, and you'll be sort of expected to be the expert. But with your background and training, that shouldn't be too much of a stretch. And finally, don't think about what you don't know. Think about what you could know. So really, it's your brain, and then your brain plus studying times infinity. Basically, if there's something you don't know that you think you need to know, just go find it. Go study. This is your chance to learn really deeply into a subject, and then to use that to help others. So remote communication, a couple of things. Make sure you know who you're speaking with and what their role is. It's very important to know sort of what their role in the project, what their role in the organization is, because that sort of helps you understand a lot of the context behind what people say. Also, try and speak to more than one person. I mostly had conversations remotely with just one person, and so when I got to the organization, some people's expectations of the project were much different than the one person I talked to, and so that so I had to sort of think on my feet to help sort of rectify everyone's expectations for the project and bring it all together. If you speak with more than one person, you can start to get an idea of everyone's different expectations. And then make plans as far as travel, workshops, everything. Make it as early as you can. That way, once you have everything sort of down, and once you know everything that's going to happen, you can spend a lot less energy just with the minutia of making plans and just save some brain power on worrying and put that towards making the workshops or research, whatever you're doing for your project. It'll make it a lot easier. So various methods. You've got Skype. That's the one I used. It's free. It generally works if they have an internet connection. You can see each other, which is nice. Phone may be on the expensive side for some of you. Email is good. As far as getting a lot of information to people or sending documents, the one big note on the method you use, I would say, is that I found this out later. Internet may cost your host organization sort of by the amount of data they use. So if you're using Skype, that might actually cost the organization quite a lot compared to phone, whereas on your side of things, phone might be slightly more expensive. And also, if you're sending large documents or pictures, just take that into consideration. If you're just constantly sending your host organization documents, them downloading it might actually cost them money. So just clearing that up at the beginning, what's their preferred and what works for you. And then finally, with the remote communication beforehand, establishing expectations for both you and for the organization, for the project as a whole. That's a very good thing to do early, so that everyone's clear on each person's role in the project. And then also try and build some trust with your organization. Don't just talk business, or at least this was my approach. Don't just talk business, learn a little bit about them, let them learn a little bit about you. Me and the person that I was talking to were actually on very similar stages of life, despite our other differences. So we talked about things like getting married and finishing up school and things. So it's a good way to build trust and just build a good relationship to start from. All right, is everybody good so far? Good. I can't actually see you at the moment, so I'm just going to assume by the silence that everybody's good. Continue on. Interpersonal, professional communication. This is as far as presentations and just working directly with stakeholders. One big thing, again, is to try and build trust, or at least build a good working relationship. And I did that starting out. I tried to emphasize that it's a two-way learning relationship. So say that I said that I was there to share the knowledge that I had accumulated and from the university. But I was also there to learn as well. And so a couple of very interesting things came up as far as we were talking about mango maturity, and I was talking about maturity indices, and the participants actually brought up some very interesting mango maturity indices that I had never thought of, but that was used around there, and it was a good way to build discussion around different things if it's a two-way discussion rather than just you spitting information at them. And also make it clear why you're there, not just I'm part of the Trellis organization, we're doing this, but why you personally are there. You want to share knowledge across borders, you want to build relationships across borders because you believe that it will benefit the world, or something, something a little more in-depth really helps to build a relationship more than just the simple, oh, I'm here because I'm part of the Trellis organization. Something about you that puts you there is helpful. Convey useful information and make it applicable. This is pretty self-explanatory, but basically try and learn who's actually going to be in the group when you're talking to them, when you're working with them. So for example, this is a picture of one of the talks that I gave, and these are sort of, the front row was sort of the wealthier growers, the more established growers of mangoes, and the back was sort of the younger growers, and then on the side over here is mostly the mango traders. And so knowing that, you can tailor different pieces of information to different people. And so that's another good thing to figure out with your host organization sort of at the very beginning. All right, and then also using relatable examples is very good, and it's a good thing to discuss with your host organization, but trying to convey it in a way, or examples that actually mean something to the people you'll be talking about. All right, in-person conversationally, when you're just talking with the stakeholders and with the organization, part of this is, I'll go into language a little bit, but part of this is just oh boy. We're having a little. Oh, we're good. Cool. All right. Yeah. So basically learning the common pronunciations that are used in the area, sort of as you go, and the common phrases that are used in the area gets to be very helpful. Yeah?
Is that like in native language or English, or? Both
native language and how English is spoken there if you're speaking in English. For example, no one really used the word plastic where I was. It was always polyethylene. And it took me a little bit to figure out what that was, and I was a little lost, but I think it was just sort of shortening polyethylene. But so things like that, you'll just learn on the go. But the quicker you can do that, the more conversations you can be a part of. If you're naturally introverted like myself, I recommend having some go-to conversations, local food, local weather patterns, or one of the easiest things to do is to be actively learning the local language if that's not English. And then if there's a lull in the conversation or sort of an awkward moment, you can ask them about, tell them that you're learning the local language and ask them to help. And actually it's a very fun way to talk with people. Watch out for sensitive subjects, of course, and part of one way to help that is to know social structures and social norms. And so basically, the more you know about the social structure, the more you'll be able to sort of react if you do get into a sensitive area, and you'll be able to avoid sensitive areas. And so these two pictures that are up, both of these individuals, I met their mango growers in Ghana, and both of them were introduced with a two-part name. And so when I was introduced to them, I assumed the two-part name was a first name and a last name. So I sort of repeated it and with a nod and a smile as in, okay, yeah, I understand that's your name. And apparently that was really hilarious because the person in the top right, the first part of their name was actually an honorific that meant that he had made a pilgrimage to Mecca. And so when I repeated it, it was kind of hilarious because it was completely out of context. And so yeah, it's just one of those things that these types of things will happen, but the more you know about the local social structures and norms, the better. And then the second, the woman in the bottom left was actually born on a Sunday. And so when they introduced her, they said she was born on a Sunday, and that's sort of an honorific at the beginning of her name as well. And so the exact same thing happened. I sort of repeated her name back with a nod and a smile, and everyone laughed at me. And it's okay. And so then this was actually a good opportunity to talk about what day you're born on is very important in the culture there. So.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Would it have been appropriate, like, did you ask to clarify in that situation? Like, how did naming conventions work, or how did you deal with it in the moment?
In the moment, it was somewhat explained, and it sort of resolved itself. But afterwards, I asked about it just to make sure I didn't get into that again. And so there's actually a different word for every day of the week based on when you were born. And so actually later in a workshop, someone during the question and answer session asked me what day I was born on, which I had no clue, which is really strange in their culture to not know what day you're born on. So then that turned into a whole discussion. Apparently it's Thursday. So yeah. But yeah, so the more you can know about sort of the cultural norms and customs, the better. All right. This is just a little bit of advice. Learn some historical context and some social context. The history, just if you learn a little history of the country, it provides just context for what the current conditions are. So this map on the right is actually a map of Africa prior to the Berlin Conference of the 1880s. So if you're going to Africa, it's maybe a good idea to look at just to look up the history of sort of Africa as a whole with the Berlin Conference, where it sort of got split up and colonized, and then how each of those countries came out of colonization in the mid to late 1900s actually partially can affect some of their social, so their political climates. And so basically knowing some history of the country, and so where they've been in the recent past as well, can be very helpful for understanding the current conditions. And again, this helps avoid controversial conversations. If there was some particularly bad time in the past, then sort of getting into a conversation about that with a stranger is maybe not the best idea. So yeah, learn a little history is one of my recommendations. Learn some of the recent leaders. You'll almost inevitably get into a conversation about maybe the current leadership or the current leadership in the United States, which will then transfer to the current leadership in their country. So it's good to know at least the current leader and the previous leader. And this also gives a little insight into the direction of the country. And then finally, learn some geography. This is many different reasons, so you don't get lost, so you know where important places are when people talk about things. So I did this just as an exercise for Ghana. This is my horrible map of Ghana that I made in paint. So know some of the neighboring countries, know where the capital is. Capital is Accra. Know where you are in relationship to where you came from. So I flew into Accra and then went to Wenchi here. Knowing some of the land masses and the water masses is very important. This is the Lake Volta, which is actually a source of water and hydroelectricity throughout the country. And so that came up a number of times. And so it's good to know some of the important natural features of the country. And then if you want an easy conversation piece, knowing the climate as well, just generally in areas, is a good idea. So you know about the climate where you are, but also how it changes as you travel. And then finally, just if there's places of interest, for example, the tree, there's a rainforest and a natural preserve in Ghana, and also some interesting mountains near Lake Volta. So just knowing just a little bit of geography can be very helpful. And then finally, language, the official language versus the spoken language. At first, when I saw I was going to Ghana, I saw English as the official language. I was relieved, oh, I'll be fine. But I would say maybe a fourth of the people that I worked with actually spoke fluent English, and then another fourth spoke fairly good English, and then about half just spoke the local language. And so so learning who speaks what and who you'll actually be presenting to is incredibly important. And then if there's educational or economic divides and how that affects language, will help you understand that. Tailoring your talks to the audience language is also very important. Giving a talk through an interpreter or through someone who's translating it for you, that was a whole new experience to me, and it sort of changed the way I did the talk. It was much slower. You sort of have to do it in sort of short spurts, and then let it be translated. And so just knowing for if you're giving a talk or a workshop, if it will need to be translated is very important for how you design that. And finally, one of maybe the biggest on communication is learn some of the local language. It improves your communication at the very best. I never got to that point, sadly, in Ghana. I was stuck on the hello and goodbye, and but at the very least, it's builds trust with the host. It makes them feel like you are sort of invested in the project and you want to know more about their culture. And actually, for me, it was quite entertaining for them to see me attempting to speak their local language, and pretty much everyone I talked to jumped in and tried to help. And so it was almost an immediate sort of team building type thing if you greet them in their language, at the very least. And there may not be a Duolingo for whatever language it is. There certainly wasn't for the language that I was learning, to the point where when I was checking into my flight, I attempted to use some of what I learned, and this was just halfway across the country, and they couldn't understand a thing I was saying. So, so it may be a very sort of local dialect that you're trying to learn, but the point is not how useful it'll be in the future. It's how much it helps you now, and how much you get out of it in the now. And finally, I have the Minions up here, because I always loved the Minion movie. They speak some hybrid of like Spanish and nonsense, but you can sort of understand what's going on the whole time if you pay attention to their mannerisms, their gestures. So even if you don't understand the language that's being spoken, if you pay attention to the context and the body language of the people speaking it, you can learn a lot of what's going on in the conversation and still be an active part. So I think that concludes, oh, good luck. Yeah, and that concludes my presentation. If anybody is going to Ghana or wants to talk about mangoes or anything at all, let me know.
Thanks,
Okay.
Nick.
Thank you.
Oh, are there any questions? I don't know. Wait, at the end. No questions.
So if you have any questions, feel free to write them down. Once everyone's spoken, then we'll take questions at the very end. We have 2 more former students that are going to speak. So Tia or Pete, are you on the line?
I'm here.
I'm here too.
Awesome. Do either of you want to go first?
I can go either way.
Same. Rock, paper, scissors? No, I'll let you go, Tia.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Tia, do you see you should have an option to share your screen?
Yeah. Got the button right here.
Mm-hmm.
Share screen.
Yeah.
Here's my PowerPoint. Share that screen. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, perfect.
Is the audio visual good?
Yeah, it's great.
Nice.
Awesome.
Let's see if this works.
Tia, do you want to give a short introduction of yourself before getting into your PowerPoint?
Yeah, well, I have slide 2 is my introduction.
Oh, perfect. All right, you got it covered then.
So let me see if I can get to slide 2. There we go.
Perfect. Okay.
I wanted to learn about the students in the class, though. How many people do you have in Trellis Fund this semester?
16. We have 16.
15 projects.
Wow. And how many people are there today?
Great question. We haven't taken attendance yet. Oh, 12.
12 people. Okay, very cool. Yeah, well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Trellis. My name is Tia, and I was in Trellis last time, like last spring. I went to Nepal, and I did a project with soil science, soil sampling, soil fertility. I had a great time. It was a great experience, and today I wanted to build on Nick's presentation about communicating with your organization and just kind of add some of the tips that add some tips that I found useful in mine. So hopefully it won't be too repetitive. So here's a little bit about me. Like I said, I was a Trellis participant last year. At that time, I was working on my master's degree at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I now am living in Florida. Since I graduated, I got a job with the University of Florida at an agricultural research station, and I'm a fruit and vegetable researcher here. So that's really cool.
Hey, Tia. I think for some reason your slideshow isn't progressing. Did you go to the next slide about me?
Yeah, I'm on the About Me slide.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason.
It says I'm still sharing.
Oh, I think she has to. Oh, here it goes.
Oh, what? I did that.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah. That's weird. One participant. Okay. Well, it just worked. I don't know if there's like a delay or something, but ignore me. I think we're okay over here. Sorry about that. All right. Thanks.
I'll let you know when we go to the next slide.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, well, I had a really great time on my trip, and I got to learn a lot about Nepal, a lot about farming over there. And like Nick was saying, like, oh, I was like, what am I going to teach those people? And I'm working with a soil scientist and all this, but I did have something to bring to the table. And actually, when I went there for my trip, like you can see in this slide, can you guys see my pointer? But we took I took some soil testing materials from Hawaii. And this is just a real basic, like rudimentary, like $100 piece of lab equipment. Like we have 5 of them sitting around our lab, but they didn't even have something like this there. And so they were really excited to see the technology that I had and learn how to use it. So next slide.
Tia, we have a question over here.
Oh, question?
That a pH meter?
Is that a pH meter?
Yeah, that is a HANA combination pH and EC meter.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So anyway, I'm going to my next slide here. So like the general tips, like Nick was saying, communicate with them however you can. But even though I have traveled to other countries in the past, are you not seeing my slide? You're muted, Asha.
Yeah, it's showing now. Thank you.
Oh, now it shows?
Yeah, I guess
Is there a time delay?
Yeah, so,
A
okay.
little time delay.
Yeah, it'll be okay.
I used all kinds of different communication methods, and email worked pretty good. Sometimes you would have to wait for a response. We used Skype, although sometimes the internet connection in Nepal was slow. And so it was kind of hard to hear what you were saying. And then I learned Viber is what a lot of people there used. And so Viber was super helpful. But they also use Facebook, they use WhatsApp. So like if you have your cell phone with you right now, I would just go ahead and download like every single communication app you can, at least the most common ones, and then see if you can contact your host in that method. And some of them, they take your phone number or whatever. And then whatever they're most responsive in is going to be a good way to communicate with them. And that's kind of a good test for what is a good method of communication. And sometimes when one doesn't work, maybe they're away from their computer and they don't have their email or they don't have the Skype, but they can do the Viber or the WhatsApp or the Facebook. So as many connections as you can make with the multiple people in your organization on different platforms, that will be good. So I'm going to the next slide. Are you guys seeing it yet? Yeah, okay, it's getting faster. So it took me forever to learn the time difference between Hawaii and Nepal, but I had a Nepalese guy in my lab, and so I would always ask him, okay, what time is it in Nepal? And it was like 4:30 p.m. My time was a good time to call them because they're just waking up and it's 10 a.m., something like that. So if you have any lab mates or people at your school who are from that country, they can help you dial into the best time to contact people, or maybe even the best communication method too, like whether they're using Viber or Facebook or stuff like that. On my team in CARD-Nepal, there were 5 people, and 1 or 2 of them were actually in the United States. So they were always the fastest to respond to me. And so that was good that like I knew they would respond faster. And then at one point I had a situation where I was getting ready to go for my trip to Nepal, and my main contact person was just not replying to me. And I would send emails and messages and just like get nothing. And so I was starting to kind of freak out because it's like, oh man, I leave in like 5 days for Nepal, and like who's going to pick me up at the airport and stuff like this. Well, apparently the guy was on vacation at that time. He was visiting his family on the other side of the country, and he didn't have internet. So when I reached out to other people and said, hey, I'm not getting a response from this guy, then they said, oh, well, he's on vacation now. Like, how can I help you? And other people. And then eventually, actually, I had to call him on the phone. So I paid on like my Viber, like $10 to be able to do international calls. And I just had to call him directly. I called him from my computer directly, and I was able to reach him on his cell phone and let him know like, hey, I'm going to be there in a couple of days, and we need to make the arrangements for me arriving. And so sometimes you just have to get what you need to get done in order to contact the people, if it means calling them on their cell phone and paying a little bit of money to do that. So I'm going to the next slide. So the organizational structure, like Nick talked about too, is very important. And, you know, I'm American. I'm not familiar with foreign names. So the guys, here's me over here on the left, and then here's the organization, CARD-Nepal, which I got that part down. But then there's Rajan, Rajendra, Jalendra, Nirajan, and Krishna. And so their names are kind of confusing. They all sound the same a little bit. And now I know them clearly, who they are and who their roles are. But when I was first starting, it was a little confusing. I would have to refer to the sheet they would give you in the Trellis proposal often and see who was who. But even their roles weren't always like really specific. Nirjan was always my contact liaison person, and that was pretty steady throughout. But then they said, well, you're going to be working with this guy, but then I ended up working with the other guy. And so you got to kind of figure it out as you go, and you'll get to know who can help you in what ways. And Rajan, he's the PI. He was the guy who was at University of New Mexico in the United States, and he was always really good at responding to my emails. So I felt like I could ask him anything, and then he would, help me get in touch with the people in Nepal. So that was really helpful for this organization. Okay, now once you're there in the country, kind of like a lot of things Nick said, you want to learn some words of your host language. That was always really entertaining for me to try to learn the Nepalese words, and they're very difficult to learn. I didn't get beyond like hello and goodbye and how are you either. But when we would go to the local cafes and to get a bite to eat, the people at the restaurants and the local people, they were really happy when I could say hello and got a big kick out of that. So about the scheduling, here my second bullet point, like you try to plan everything in advance, and they even gave me a schedule, but then we really had to be flexible and go day by day. And one day we were supposed to give a PowerPoint, and we ended up doing soil testing that day. And so you just have to be ready to go with the flow and switch it up however they need it, because the organization too, they're just working with groups of local farmers. So it's like whatever when the farmer says, okay, I'm ready, I'm available, let's do it now, then we're tailoring to their needs and we're helping them out in that way. It also helps to carry like a little notebook. That way you can write down people's names and refer to that later. I found that to be really useful. Trying to be culturally appropriate. In Nepal, most of the women wear pants or traditional garb that they're fully covered. And so I wore pants like the whole time that I was there. And I talked to some people about being culturally appropriate, and they said, well, you're American, so we know like you guys wear shorts, but I just wanted to be conservative and wear pants the whole time. And because I'm already the only white person like in Nepal, like in the small town that I went. And so I just wanted to lay low and fit in, the best that I could. And also about what Nick was saying about, a lot of people speak English. Yeah, some in the major cities, but where the small town that I was in, when we were working with the farmers, absolutely none of them spoke like any English. So it was only the people affiliated with the university that spoke English. And I was lucky to have a group of undergraduate students who was volunteering with us. And so they were like my translators, and that was really helpful. And they became my friends too. I still keep in touch with them now. So just knowing that, culturally appropriate, I wish I would have had more time to research the country that I was going to and their culture before I went there. But you know how it is being a grad student and always having papers to write and research and stuff. So that pretty much wraps it up for my presentation. And I think we're keeping the questions for the end. So thank you for having me. I hope that was helpful.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tia.
I'm going to stop share screen now. Right? Stop share.
Perfect.
Got it.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and start with Pete. Pete, if you want to give a brief intro, and then we'll let you take it away. And then after Pete's done, we'll take questions. Thanks, guys.
All right. Hey, everybody. So I, too, was a Trellis fellow last spring with Tia. I'm a graduate PhD student at NC State studying entomology. And the focus of my project, I was in Kenya working with their equivalent to APHIS here in the US. And my objective was to basically educate tomato and potato farmers about several invasive pests that had been recently introduced into Kenya. So I was developing educational materials and then providing some training sessions for farmers that were interacting with the organization, and also performing some surveys with the farmers. And so far, Nick and Tia have done a great job, I think, of covering the really important parts of the communication with your organizations. I had a little bit unique experience this spring. my travel to Kenya was, I think it was a week right after we had finished these training sessions. It had to be that soon because of the weather. The wet season was starting in Kenya. I think it started like basically almost as soon as I got there. So they wanted me to get there quickly so we could make progress while the weather cooperated. So that presented some challenges. And I, in particular, had some difficulty establishing communication with my contacts at KIFIS right away. Sent a lot of emails right off the bat, and I wasn't hearing quick responses. And I think that seemed to be somewhat typical, or not typical, but at least a couple other fellows last year had the same issues. And so what I ended up doing was contacting the organizers or facilitators last year through Trellis to help me try to establish this communication, because I think almost like a month went by and I hadn't really heard anything. So that helped a lot. And they actually got me in contact with a couple other people involved in the project. So originally I was interacting or trying to interact with someone who was basically an administrator, and they were obviously pretty busy and I wasn't a high priority on their list. So once I actually started interacting with what were basically like the county agents that I actually performed the training sessions with, it went a lot smoother. And we found out pretty quickly that, at least with the people that I was interacting with, WhatsApp was by far the most efficient and quick method to get communication back and forth going. And then from there, we'd talk via or chat via WhatsApp, and then from there set up our Skype meetings. So I would really strongly suggest that, like Tia said, use as many, and I think Nick mentioned it too, use as many like avenues for communication as possible, and try to find out who you'll be working with, because the more people that you can contact and set up that communication earlier, the better, because sometimes for whatever reason, people just aren't going to respond to you. So that helped out early on. And it was really important to maintain that communication, especially since I was going so quickly, that we made sure we had all our plans laid out the best we could. We actually had some issues finalizing my M&E matrix, which you guys will be talking about later. So just really stress that communication is important early on. Make sure you get that as much planning done as well as possible. When I was actually in Kenya, I had a great time, and English is one of the national languages there. And honestly, I think I met one individual that was speaking Swahili and not Kenyan, so it wasn't an issue. What I found to be pretty helpful, though, and this was kind of just luck, one of my friends, a fellow graduate student here, was in Kenya several years previous, and he had like a phrase book that he bought from Amazon or something like that. So I was kind of leafing through that a little bit before my trip, and then on the flight, continued to look at it, and that honestly was kind of helpful. So I think you can pick them up for like $4 or $5 and is not a bad investment. One other thing that I found pretty useful is, like, once I actually got to Kenya, I made sure that I purchased a SIM card so I could use my phone there. It was a little bit of money, but I believe I got reimbursed by Trellis for it, and that allowed me to continue to be able to text and communicate with the people I was interacting with, because I wasn't staying with them, so we had to coordinate how I was getting picked up, and just communication was important while I was still there. Let me think what else. Yeah, like Tia said, it's really important to stay flexible. I think Tia said that, or Nick. Many times plans kind of fell through, and so you just got to be able to roll with the punches, I guess. And let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like what I was going to say has already been expressed by the previous two presentations. So at that point, I guess I'll probably, in the interest of time, wrap up my talk. But if anybody has any questions later on, I'd be happy to address them, especially if you're going to Kenya. So yeah, that's what I got.
Thanks, Pete. All right. So at this point, we can go ahead and some questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself. If you could introduce yourself and the project that very briefly say the project you're working on and where, so the former students know the context of your question. That would be great. So yeah, feel free to, if you have a question for a specific presenter, you can direct it at them, or you guys should also feel free to answer any questions that you think you have some valuable feedback on. All right, so any questions?
Sure, I have questions if I can go first. Thank you. I'm Russell.
What's up, Russ?
Hey, Tia, how are you? Hey,
Good.
Colin, too.
Hey, Tia.
Colin.
We're wearing the same shirts.
Yeah, good to see you, Tia.
Good.
So I had a question for, was it Nate? The first presenter? I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Nick.
Sorry. Okay. So how exactly, oh, yes. I am working with Horti Tenjeru in Tanzania, and we're doing essentially a bunch of training material on mulching mainly, but then all around nursery management and seedling development, that type of thing. Fertilizing, irrigation, they basically want the whole works. So I'm doing a lot of training material, and it's mostly going to be oral and on boards and flip charts and that type of thing. So I wanted to know, how were the expectations different between the person whom you were talking with beforehand and the people that you were talking with when you got there? So in detail, like what were their expectations?
Okay, so the person I was talking to, his expectations were more on the post-harvest side, I would say, compared to some of the administrative people at the university, which actually the university was heavily involved. First thing that happened when I went to the university is I met with the dean of that college and then the department head. And each one of them actually had their own ideas of what to get out of the project and what the stakeholders could get out of the project. So for example, the department head wanted more on the small scale processing side and the and how specific farmers could take their leftover mangoes and make them into something useful. And that compared to the post-harvest side, which was the person I was talking to. And then the dean was maybe more interested in just building relationships between just the university and the stakeholders in the area, which the project certainly did. But yeah, so it was just slight differences, and I would say it's more differences in emphasis than actual content.
Okay.
Yeah, but that bled into workshops where the department head would maybe go on a tangent about what they could specifically do at home, whereas I was prepared more for post-harvest because that's sort of the emphasis that I got.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, that does. I just want to know what I should be prepared for as far as like bringing extra material or just being ready for something different, or trying to push them to make sure that that's exactly what they want through like the monitoring and evaluation plan or something like that.
Yeah. And I would say just be honest too. If suddenly you get a curveball of different expectations, just be honest. Say, so I was prepared for this, and it will take a little bit of work to change it. But yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. And sorry I got your name wrong right off the bat.
No, that's okay.
And so I only have one other question, and I think it would be helpful for everybody. I was already able to have a conference with my host organization, and I was asking them about lodging, and they basically batted it back to me and said, hey, you need to tell us what your price range is so that we know what to recommend to you. So is there a cap for the lodging? And I think this would be helpful for everybody, because I need to kind of give them an idea of how much I'm supposed to be spending a night.
Sorry. For lodging prices, we the general guideline, there's no hard and fast rule of what we will and will not reimburse, but we say try to keep food and lodging modest. So definitely no 4- or 5-star hotels, but we want to make sure you feel safe and comfortable and that the establishment is clean and that you just feel okay staying there. So I would say if you could just give your organization those rough guidelines, like something modest but comfortable. And if you think it sounds high, like feel free to send us an email with specific numbers. But generally, it's pretty open on our end, but nothing too fancy.
Do you have a ballpark, like is $50 a night? Like I don't even know at all like general pricing. I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'll look
I would have to look up specific. I don't know. Have any of the students from last year, can you say what you spent per night?
I think mine was $30 a night, and it was nicer than I really wanted or needed. But they sort of insisted that this was the place to be in Wenchi. So yeah, $30 a night. But then the food was, the food at the hotel was more expensive. So you can go eat elsewhere, or
Did people hear that okay?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not muted, but Asha was muted. Did people hear Nick's response okay, or do I need to repeat it? Or you heard it? Cool. Okay, awesome.
$30.
Other questions? We have probably 4 more minutes or so for questions, and then we're going to switch gears here and move on to our next presentation about Trellis sort of external communications.
I had a question regarding developing a lot of these educational materials, which seems like a lot of people are doing. And I acknowledge a lot of the people in these communities are illiterate. So how did you guys balance between like presenting information correctly without you sort of losing a lot of that information when you try to make like a pamphlet or educational material that is available? Because most of the time we do it with words, and if you can't use words, like what did you do instead?
Do you want to?
Yeah.
Also answer that. But so for me specifically, we had a manual that I developed on Mango post-harvest, and that ended up being more for the university and there's an organization, which a lot of times there will be an organization of growers in the area. And so that ended up with them and not necessarily the individual farmers. And the presentation was by and large visual for the farmers. So,
Peter, Tia, do you have any other responses to that?
I ended up kind of following the same approach that Nick just described. So,
Yeah, visual aids, like drawing diagrams, detailed diagrams.
Awesome.
Things, make sure it ends up in the because otherwise it's just sitting here and it's not useful. So if you do develop, even your notes are extremely useful. So
Because someone in your organization, like there are these literate people in your organization, and then they can figure out how to best share that information with the farmers. I was specifically told to make a pictorial diagram, and I didn't know how to balance like pictures, because I'm also not an artist, so it's just
Right.
I wasn't sure sort of the balance.
I have a question for Tia, specific. Is it okay if I?
Question for Tia specifically. Anyone else have a question?
Mine's more of a comment about language. Hi guys, I'm Claire. I'll be working in Uganda on oranges and mangoes. But it's more of a comment for everyone else that's going this year. I've started looking into like learning Swahili, just pronunciations and stuff. And there's a lot of really good like YouTube resources. And there actually is a Duolingo for Swahili. So if you're just interested in learning some of the basic like pronunciation stuff, that's been really helpful for me so far. So,
But the Duolingo for Swahili doesn't have an oral.
No,
Yeah.
but it does have a lot of written stuff. But the YouTube that I've found are helpful in terms of pronunciation. Yeah.
Yeah, like Pete said, I would have found the SIM card from my phone helpful. Like I didn't get that. And then when I got there, they're like, oh, did you get a phone? And I was like, no, you didn't tell me to get a phone. So if you guys can be like more proactive and just like think for yourself instead of calling your, what do I need? What do I need to bring? Just be like, okay, I'm going to have my list of numbers. I'm going to get a SIM card for my phone. And that way you'll be dialed in.
The other thing that I found was pretty useful, and this doesn't have anything to do with communication, but in Kenya, they use kind of like electronic banking, K-Pesa, I think is what it's called. And I don't know if they're going to use something similar to that in countries that you're visiting, but it's worth investigating because it made that kind of transaction and at least getting that phone running a heck of a lot easier. So I don't know, something else to look into that I didn't really find out till right before I went down there.
Awesome. Should we? Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say a couple more quick notes on this topic, and then we're going to hand it over to our communications colleague, Brenda. But I hope everyone got a chance to watch Mark's recording as well. I thought it was really useful, especially combined with the students' experiences. But just to reiterate, I think it's really important, the sooner you can research your organization, figure out what their mission is, their goals, do they do research or extension, really manage expectations around what they do in the community and what they expect from you as the student. Just so everyone knows, the initial proposals from all the projects were submitted almost a year ago. They were clarified about 6 months ago, but understand that everyone's projects might be in like a little bit of flux. So again, being flexible, anticipating changes that might come up with specific objectives or outcomes. And I think constant communication with your organization will help clear up if any changes have been made. And I think it's really just about managing expectations around what your role is, what you can bring to the project, being honest with your organization and starting that process early. That list of cultural norms I thought from Mark's presentation was kind of entertaining and interesting and just something to think about. I will send some follow-up resources as well. But I think for now, let's go ahead and transition to Brenda.
Should we tell the students?
Yeah, Pete and Tia and Nick, thank you all for presenting and sharing about your experiences. We really appreciate it. You are free to go. So thank you so much, and I can share your contact information with students if that's okay with you for any follow-up questions.
Yeah. Definitely. If anybody's got questions.
Cool, thank you so much.
See ya.
Nice to see you, Lauren. And I hope you all do YouTube videos.
Bye, Tia. Good to see you.
Bye. Bye, Russ. Bye, Pete.
Okay, I am going to pull up the documents that Brenda will be going over. Desktop.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So, hi. Sorry. So, like, who am I speaking to? All of you here, or a couple of you here. So, I'm Brenda Dawson. I'm the communications for the Cultural Innovation. And this is kind of on the other end of communications, I guess, for your projects. So it's a little bit of a leadership. But as the communications coordinator for the Cultural Innovation Lab, the Trellis Fund and your all participation in it, really a communication opportunity.
Yeah, can everyone make sure they're muted? I think it might be Sidra. All right.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
I was like, should I keep talking?
Sorry.
You guys can watch out for that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, muted. All right, awesome.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, I see as the Horticulture Innovation Lab's communications person, I see Trellis as kind of a communications opportunity for us. Because you guys are going to all these different places, you each have a different set of skills and a different focus that you're bringing to it. And so it's kind of like these miniature doses of the work that we otherwise are doing. And plus, honestly, people like to hear about student stories a lot more than they like to hear about like the older researcher story. So Trellis is kind of this fun opportunity for me. When it comes to publicity or to sharing your stories back around. And I also recognize that as graduate students and as people that are heading off into their careers and building your career, this is also a professional development opportunity for you, not just development, professional opportunity for you to toot your horn and, talk about your skills and your experiences and advance your career. So there are lots of opportunities generally it's after you travel, because that's when things seem to most likely be interesting for your project. And I kind of want to mention some of the things we've done in the past and walk you through the things that I'm thinking about for communications. So in the past, we've shared Trellis Fund student stories in a bunch of different ways. The low-hanging fruit is writing a blog post for the Horticulture Innovation Lab's website. I've written about students, or students have also in various ways written it themselves. There's also another website, and an obvious website to share it on would be AgriLinks, which is an international development focused agricultural website, but there may be other websites that you know of within your expertise or that happen to come up in the next year. We've also written success stories for USAID or for Feed the Future, where we're touting the success and use Trellis student stories as an example. And then I've also done things where I've had a local reporter here in Davis who got interested in Trellis and how it worked.
Sorry.
No,
Can
okay.
everyone make sure they're muted? Okay. I don't know how it's not. Okay. Manage participants. Okay. Sidra, if you can make sure you're muted, it keeps unmuting you. I already did this before, but do it again. Okay.
I've introduced Trellis students to a reporter before, and then she wrote up stories about their experiences, and then also just where I've shared things with like around the campus. And some of that is obviously a little bit more UC Davis focused, but I'm really interested in doing that at other universities as well. But I recognize that you folks at Florida or NC State or Hawaii are kind of my portal into that. So it would be a little bit more on you to tell me where you see an opportunity, or if your department or your lab might want to hear more stories. Your time. Maybe they're dropping off.
I don't know how to keep them permanently muted. Sidra, if you could make sure you're muted, that would be awesome. Okay.
Here you go.
I'm typing you a message. Please mute yourself. Sorry about this, guys. Okay.
No worries. We're learning how to be flexible on the spot.
So there's a lot of different ways that these stories can be shared, I guess. And if you have, basically this tends to be something where most of the time in the past, it's been things where I see an opportunity and I'm like, hey, do we have some Trellis stories that will fit this, and reach out to people, to students who I know who have traveled and that might have a story to share. But if you have something, an opportunity, an idea that you have, or a way to toot your horn, like let me know. I'm happy to help, or I'm happy to have you guys run and just watch from the distance. As far as actually doing stuff. So I recognize, first I just want to say before I get too far, because I kind of go into this, is that first, of course, your work comes first. Of course, like your relationships with the organizations, your accomplishments with them and with helping farmers are what comes first. And these requests that I have related to communications are definitely secondary. So obviously I'm aware of that. But these are my requests while you travel. So, so before you go, the two things to think about are bringing a camera with you if possible. Everyone's first question there is, does a smartphone count? Absolutely. You can decide what is most useful to you and what works best. Sometimes people's smartphone cameras are pretty dinged up, and then the photos that come out are kind of sad. But bringing a camera with you would be great to document your trip in overall, and then to hopefully share some photos back with us later. Also consider before you go potentially bringing a shirt or a hat that has your university's logo on it. This makes people uncomfortable a lot. It's something that we also ask of our researchers as well. Having photos at the end where you happen to be wearing a shirt with your university's logo on it is just a really quick shorthand for people to have an idea of what's going on. But that said, absolutely use your judgment. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, if it doesn't feel appropriate, feel free to skip that. So those are kind of the before you're there in terms of communication. So while you're there, my big thing still is to take photos of the work that you're doing. The photos that I'm most interested in most often, the best photos show you and your partners actively working together. And so that means that sometimes you will want someone else to be taking photos. So handing your camera off if somebody else doesn't have a camera. A lot of times the organizations will have people there taking photos, but then it's making sure that you know that you can get those photos. It tends to still be easier to hand your camera off and say, hey, do you mind while I'm giving this presentation, or when we visit this farmer, do you mind taking some photos of what we're doing? And if possible, if some of probably the people that you're working with, you'll know their names, but if you have a bunch of photos of like a lead farmer somewhere or somebody who keeps showing up in your photos but you don't really know their name, if you have a chance to get their whole name, that would be lovely. And for them to understand that you were taking photos, is it okay if you share those photos in their name with us? Having the ability to name people in a photo feels like a way that we can share some respect and with those people, instead of it just being like a farmer in Kenya. Woman farmer in Kenya. Okay, yes, we can tell now. So that's lovely to get that information. And then we have a new kind of request, but I want, photos are still really, really useful because they're useful in so many different ways, but we're also expanding into video quite a lot. And so if you have a chance, and if the smartphone or the camera that you have with you takes videos, it'd be lovely to take some video clips. The easiest, what we're kind of looking for is probably before your day starts or at the end of your day, sometime when you have a quiet moment, basically shooting a little video diary for like 30 to 90 seconds where you just kind of talk about, if it's before the day started, where you're at, what you're planning to do for the day, what challenges you're looking out for, or what thing you're really excited about. Just one simple highlight about what's going on or what just happened if it's at the end of the day, a challenge, a surprise, something that you ran into, just a short story. If you take a couple of those over the course of your trip, I think that we'll find at the end of it that we can piece something together and potentially have a video that tells some version of what you were doing that we would be happy for you to share, or that we might be happy to put together and work with you to edit into something nice. Sorry. We do have this whole separate document on, which I don't know where it is. I feel like it feels a little heavy-handed to have a whole document just about video clips, but we do have one because I feel like there's a lot more people are like maybe less familiar, and we're certainly a little bit new to it too, about what kind of things we're looking for in video clips. I don't mean for it to be like the one thing that we want from you. It's just we have more questions, and we're still kind of exploring this. So the idea is basically hold the camera steady. Please don't pan. Which is actually everybody's first instinct is to like kind of they call it sprinkler shots, like. So hold the camera steady. If it's a video diary, just hold your whatever at arm's length, looking back at you. Horizontal is best still. And then if you're really into it and you want to take video clips while you're out doing things, just like you are with photos, just hold the camera steady for about 6 seconds each time you have it looking at something, if that makes sense. And then you can reframe. So you might have like, let's say a farmer in a row somewhere doing something. So you have a shot where you can see the farmer and they're bending over and they're planting. And then you hold that for 6 seconds, and then you're closer to them and you have a shot of their hand, and you have that, you're holding that for 6 seconds, and then you're reframing and you're seeing the plant. That's if you're really into the video taking. But yeah, take some photos. If you can get some video diaries, that'd be great. And then when you get back, we will we'll check in with you. We'll have a box folder for you to share photos and videos that you're comfortable sharing with us. And then if the travel report, we've adjusted, this is good actually, this is after years of Trellis, we've adjusted how this works a little bit so that we can try to collect your stories a little bit in that trip report, so that we're not kind of collecting we're not collecting bureaucratic stuff, but that we are collecting things that hopefully are useful. And the questions and answers that are in that travel report are really intended not to evaluate your performance and not to evaluate your organization's performance or the success of your project. It's just trying to say, like, what are maybe the stories that you might be able to tell? And I think good and bad, and things that we can just kind of keep, some of them we might want to keep in a back pocket somewhere, and some of them we might say, oh, this would be really cool. Can we shine a light on this story that you shared with us? I also want to make sure that you know that we wouldn't simply take something from you sharing photos with us and sending in a trip report and suddenly it's like published on a blog somewhere. You'll be part of that process, and you'll be part of reviewing it and proving that it's okay to share. And then what we've been doing is also setting up a debrief meeting after that, either with the Trellis crew or with me or some combination, where we run through any questions that we have about photos or videos or about your stories, and kind of interview you if needed to get more stuff. So that is the gist of the communications as I see it, in terms of telling and sharing your stories back out. And yeah, I'm curious to hear how all of your trips go, for sure. And if you have any ideas or personal passions, or very open to hearing them. So that's all, I think. Let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, and
or yeah, it's up to you. If you want me to throw it in, I can do that. Sorry.
No,
I'll just leave
okay.
it.
We have about 13 minutes left, so we can we can open the space up for more Q&A if students just want to discuss things that are on their mind, or if you want to share about the branding communication stuff. It's up to you.
Sure, I can either way. What do you think is best?
Okay, can you mute yourself?
Yeah.
hang on, just take a second.
Okay. We have about 10 minutes left. Would people want to ask more questions about what's been presented today, or because we can also have Brenda speak a little bit more on branding, which is another communications topic.
I have tons of questions.
Anyone have any strong feelings? Are there more questions? Because if not, we can have Brenda present more.
I have a question. So, hello?
Prasanta, we can't hear you.
Really?
I can hear you, but it's very loud in the background. Maybe you need to. There's like a really loud humming. Do you have like?
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now? So I'm confused just about the presentation. So just to take a small 30 to 9 videos instead of long.
Yes. Yeah, definitely short videos. Video clips where we're just basically making we're interested in you taking just a 30-second to 60-second video diary where you're talking into the screen and just kind of reporting on what's been going on, how things are going. And then the thing that I kind of got into the weeds about is if you want to shoot clips that show the work that you're doing or out in the field with farmers or in the classroom, the idea is to hold your screen still for about 6 seconds at a time and to get many different frames. But again, to keep all of the shots like ended by at least a minute or shorter. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Russell, did you have a question?
Yeah. So how many people have talked with their host organization so far? A lot. So my experience was that I thought we were going to have a long, lengthy conversation that would have a lot going on, but it was almost like pulling teeth, getting them to talk to me about what they wanted from the project. And almost with everything, they were just batting back, said, well, it's up to you about what kind of training material you want to make. They gave me a rough outline of how much time they wanted me to make training material, but how is that normal? And should I just be rolling with that, or should I be pushing for more of a participation? Like they basically said, just do the monitoring and evaluation report and send it to us. And if we like it, we'll say yes. If we don't like it, we'll add to it. So I just don't know if that's normal or if I need to be pushing them to help me a little bit more.
Can I answer?
So it seems like, Russell, you're not alone, that a few other students have also experienced that. And I would say that from year to year, it really is a case-by-case situation with each organization. Some organizations, I think it has a lot to do with capacity. So for example, the organization I'm working with, I'm getting the sense that they're a small team and they're pretty strapped for cash and time. And so I'm trying to be like the least amount of burden as possible, but also bring value. And so I think it'll vary from organization to organization and trying to figure out, okay, how big is their staff? Do they seem like they have more resources, both in time and money, and then approach the conversation accordingly? I would say, so I actually have visited Hori Tengeru in Tanzania, and they actually have a pretty big team, which might be part of it. Maybe your project is one small activity of many. So maybe trying to clarify where your project fits in with the bigger organizational structure, like what else do they have going on? And I'm not sure if they have a website, trying to find out if your organization has a website so you can just get more context about, I think it'll help you everyone manage their own expectations if they're able to do more background research. I would say if you're being met with a little bit of resistance just around collaborating on the monitoring and evaluation matrix or developing materials or training guidelines, maybe trying to segment your conversations. So maybe devoting one email or one Skype call specifically to one topic and try to dig into that versus sending them lots of things all in one email. I would say try different strategies. But don't push too hard. It's like that balancing act.
I think I came in too structured anyways. I had just listened to the communicating with your organization, and then almost immediately after I had the meeting with them. So I didn't have the time to like create like some dialogue. I mean, I talked about myself, but it was like pretty structured, kind of boring. So maybe they just didn't enjoy it, you know?
I think it'll help hopefully next week when we talk about conducting interviews and participatory approaches to doing research. We have a presenter who's very well versed in that, and I think he'll share some strategies with us of how we can really make a dynamic relationship and collaborative partnership with our organizations. I wouldn't be surprised for most people if the beginning is a little bit rocky. Like if you've spoken with your organization, you're not sure how it's going to go. I think hopefully as we move through the next few months, it'll smooth out and expectations will be clearer on all sides.
Great. I feel the same way. I just wanted to get a little bit of support.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks. Does anyone else have any questions or things you want to talk about for the next 5 minutes or so? Everyone's really quiet.
I have a question. I don't know if I'm too loud or not.
No, you're good.
Okay, so when we are using, when we are in the country and with the organization group, how do we represent ourselves? Are we a Trellis fellow, or we represent the University of Florida? For example, if I'm representing University of Florida because I'm wearing Florida shirt, and what would Trellis recommend us doing?
That's an excellent question. Brenda, do you mind taking this one of just like, here, I can pass my computer.
Sure. Yeah, so.
Sorry.
No, it's
Sorry.
okay.
My name is Krishna, and I'm from University of Florida.
Perfect. No, I think that this is actually kind of related to the branding stuff, but I would say you are definitely from the University of Florida and a grad student. And the details of it are that you're with the Horticulture Innovation Lab and the Trellis Fund project, but ultimately you're still a grad student at the University of Florida when you're traveling. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I was just not sure.
Sure. And I mean, the gist of the logos, just because I feel like it's related. So when you end up making materials, we have you'll find it on the PyStar list of things. The branding goes basically, we have the Horticulture Innovation Lab logo block, which is it basically looks like 3 logos. It's like USAID, Horticulture Innovation Lab, and UC Davis. And that whole thing is what represents our program, and it has to do with the collaborative nature of our program. And so any materials that you make need to have that on it. And then in addition to it, probably the logo for the organization the lead organization that you're working with. And if you're not at UC Davis, feel free to add in your university as well. As you saw on that fact sheet that I had up earlier, when I write about Trellis, I include the Horticulture Innovation Lab logo block, so USAID, Horticulture Innovation Lab, UC Davis, and then also UF, NC State, and Hawaii's logos, because that to me is the representation for this whole program. You don't need to do all of that, but you need to get in the Horticulture Innovation Lab and your university and then the partner organization as well. And there's a disclaimer sentence that basically once you put a USAID logo on something, you kind of need to put this disclaimer that says that the US government hasn't reviewed it, but that they are funding it. So you'll find that to just copy paste off of that PowerPoint slide about branding.
Yeah, and we can definitely talk more about the branding. The last session of the seminar, we'll talk about creating extension materials and sort of best practices around how to label them with logos and things like that. Any other questions? Let's see. Okay, I just have a few quick things I want to bring to people's attention. Asha, do you think you could share your screen?
Mm-hmm.
While Asha's getting her screen set up, some of you may have received emails from me introducing you to an alumni student who's worked with your organization in the past. I just wanted to alert to you that we're trying to really build up the Trellis network and make sure that knowledge gets passed from each generation of students. So I encourage you to connect with them and try to get their feedback and experience on working with the organization. I think that'll be really valuable for people. So Asha's on the Trellis PyStar, the PyStar homepage. Would you be able to go to, so under Trellis Fund Seminar, there's a resources for students link. I just wanted to alert everyone that I've added a few more things to this just so you know that they're there. It's just loading here. Maybe.
I think the internet here is very slow because I cannot open any pages.
Okay. Okay, well, I can send this as a link as well, but basically I went through and combined all the different fact sheets from every round of Trellis, so rounds 1 through 6. So all the students, the project names, and the countries are listed in like one 8-page PDF. I would encourage you just to scroll through it and see if your organization has done a Trellis project before, or if there are any students or projects you want to be connected with, let me know and I can make that happen. I also added another folder with more post-harvest resources. So I know like 5 students are doing post-harvest projects, so check those out. And then in the, can you open up the instructions document? It's the top one, I think. Yeah, under general resources, the Trellis Fund grant instructions for students. This document is, I would say, probably one of the most important ones on this whole page, and it doesn't seem like it wants to load today, but, oh, great. So I just met with someone from Travel Safety and Security here on campus. So I've made some slight modifications, nothing major, and so anything I've changed is just in red font. So just take a note of the red font updates. And for next week, if you could just take a look at the interview questions that are also on the Trellis Pi-Star page. It's under, let's see if you, interview question, so it's the last one under general resources. Interview questions for Trellis organizations. I think that might be where we start our session next week on participatory approaches. So just be familiar with the things that we suggest you speak with your organization about, and I think we'll work together to modify these questions so students are getting the best information from their organization to inform their project. Okay, we're over time. Sorry to keep you all. Thank you for joining, and if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. Thanks to all our presenters. Thanks, Brenda, for coming in. We appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.